showcase multiple rhetorical tactics used by MAGA supporters and their opposition. Below is a breakdown of key themes, the tactics being used, and the correct responses to misinformation. At 1, the Trump as a dictator debate tactic used. How is Trump a dictator? Denial and gaslighting. Response: a dictator doesn't have to ban elections to be one. They just need to remove the checks on their power. Trump has purged the judiciary and military leadership, attempted to use the military against civilians, BLM protests, Jan 6 response, called for jailing political opponents and journalists, declared that he will act as a dictator on day 1, surrounded himself with extremists who want to dismantle democracy, Project 2025, Heritage Foundation, Eric Prince's private army proposal. Correcting the narrative. Trump isn't a dictator in the classic sense yet, but he's following the playbook of authoritarian leaders. His own words and actions show that he wants to eliminate democratic restraints on his power. 2. Martial law and suppression of protest tactic used. Trump won't declare martial law, false reassurance and deflection response. Trump wanted to use the military against protesters in 2020, but was blocked by military officials. He has now purged those officials, making it easier to declare martial law or use the Insurrection Act in his second term.
That's right.
His allies want to classify protesters as terrorists, which would allow them to be detained indefinitely, correcting the narrative. If Trump calls the military on American citizens in response to protests, that's a hallmark of authoritarianism. Step 3. Veteran support and Trump's betrayal tactic used, avoiding the question, what has Trump done for veterans? Response: Trump repeatedly insulted veterans and called them suckers and losers. He diverted military funding to build his border wall. He allowed Russian bounties on U.S. troops in Afghanistan to go unchecked. He gutted veteran health care programs and tried to privatize the VA. Correcting the narrative. MAGA claims to support veterans, but Trump's record shows repeated betrayals of the military. In 4, election misinformation and whataboutism tactic used. 2020 was rigged, so why complain about 2024? Whataboutism and false equivalence. Response: there is no evidence of widespread fraud in 2020. Even Trump's own officials, Barr, DHS, cybersecurity, Republican governors, confirmed this. The difference? Trump's allies are actively working to change election laws to favor him. Correcting the narrative. There's a difference between baseless election fraud claims and real election manipulation through voter suppression and court takeovers. If 5, the left wants to take your guns argument tactic used, liberals don't support the Second Amendment. Response: many liberals and leftists own guns, they just don't fetishize them. The real threat to gun rights. Trump himself, he supported red flag laws, banning bump stocks, restricting gun ownership for certain groups. Correcting the narrative. If you truly care about gun rights, putting in once democracy is gone, so are your rights.
That's right.
6, Pam Bondi and the death penalty for civil crimes tactic used. That's not true. Prove it, shifting and deflection. Response: if there is a leaked DOJ memo showing Pam Bondi pushing for executions for civil crimes, that is a major escalation of authoritarian policies. This aligns with MAGA's desire to criminalize dissent and expand executive power. Correcting the narrative. The GOP is increasingly embracing extreme punishments, even for nonviolent offenses. This sets the stage for political persecution. 7, Trump is just cleaning up the government argument tactic used. Trump is draining the swamp, not being a dictator. Framing and false response. Trump isn't draining the swamp. He's replacing it with loyalists. His purge of judges, military officials, and DOJ watchdogs is about eliminating oversight, not fighting corruption. Real anti-corruption efforts involve independent investigations, not firing everyone who disagrees with you. Correcting the narrative. Trump's swamp argument is a cover for consolidating power and dismantling accountability. 8. Religious extremism and MAGA tactic used. Jesus supports Trump, Christian nationalism, and theocratic framing. Response: Trump's policies violate core Christian teachings, helping the poor, compassion, humility. Christian nationalism isn't Christianity, it's a political weapon.
There you go. It's a political weapon used to control the MAGATs.